Dear ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to speak in the context of the 2020 edition of the conference Dark Archives. I would like to thank the organizers Stephen Pink, Julie Dreswina and Anthony Lappin for giving me this opportunity. My name is Ulrike Wuttke and I'm a researcher and lecturer at the Department of Information Science and the University of Applied Sciences Potsdam in Germany. I have a background in medieval studies, digital humanities and library and information science. And among my specialist topics are open science, research data management and digital infrastructures. This year's global pandemic caused by corona has afflicted our health, our daily lives, but also the areas of culture, education and scholarship. It has especially afflicted medieval scholarship because it disrupted physical access to primary and secondary sources, or figuratively speaking, the light went out in the archives. Medievalists have lost access to their sources, their essential working tools, not only because these sources do not exist in digital form, but also because, for example, individual digital access models are often so expensive that it is difficult for many institutions to pay the surging fees. Not all medieval research and teaching has come to an abrupt end by the lockdown. Digital resources and tools have come to play a large role in medieval research and teaching already. They were not afflicted by the pandemic and research could continue. So one might say that especially for digital medievalists, the extreme lockdown situation was only an amplification of how their research is done already anyway. This is only one side of the coin, because it applies only to a small number of researchers in a quite specialized strand of research. However, it is a very interesting thought experiment to see how one can take these success stories further, and this is what my talk will be about. I will first focus on the status quo of working with digital resources and tools in the context of knowledge production and communication in medieval studies by outlining which aspects are currently difficult to research using digital resources and tools, which aspects are less difficult to research using digital resources and tools, and where the use of digital resources and tools enhances research or even makes the impossible possible. Then I will discuss which steps are needed to unlock enhancing potentials of digital resources and tools further and argue for a deeper embedding of digital practices based on open science ethos into medieval studies, scholarly production and communication. In my 20 minutes talk, I will concentrate on how we can come from a science-centric, closed print paradigm in medieval research to a participatory, open, digital enhanced research paradigm, touching on key concepts like openness, data-centric and FAIR, as well as on the different roles of key actors in this paradigm change, researchers and cultural heritage institutions such as libraries and archives. Given my background as a textual scholar, I will use mainly examples from the study of medieval manuscripts, as these are the best known to me. Even though my argument departs from the study of medieval manuscripts, its main aspect could easily be transferred onto other research objects, and my final propositions are not limited to this research area only. They are embedded in the broader context of the ongoing paradigm change in the way scholarship in the arts and humanities and beyond is done and communicated. My humble reflections are meant as a contribution to the discussion that was set out as a question of this year's call for paper for the Dark Archives conference. What will be the new scholarly forms for the fruits of digital research? So where are we now? There is no denying that working and teaching is different with digital objects. Most medievalists will acknowledge the importance of being able to access and work with physical sources, at least once in a while, even if mostly their research workflows are digital. Besides the ensuing excitement and often discussed aura or authenticity of the original, there are other more pragmatic reasons why originals matter. The first reason is that not all manuscripts are digitized. This point touches upon the politics and economics of digitization in general. Think of selection or resources that I cannot go into detail now. The second reason is that always some aspects of the original objects are lost during digitization, like touch or smell. While we are aware of the fact that digital surrogates do not equal the originals, we are less consciously aware of how the digital surrogates relate to the originals and how this relationship is shaped by a combination of conscious and less conscious choices, technical possibilities and obstacles, as well as resources. The digital surrogate of, for example, a medieval manuscript is in a way the original stripped down to some of its essentials, that is, aspects whose representation or not representation in the context of the digital surrogate is defined by external factors, that is, factors external to the original object. To make this point clearer, I will dwell for a while on the potentials of digital resources and tools for medievalist knowledge production and communication. First of all, research without immediate access to the originals. This comes in handy not only during lockdown, but also in all kinds of other situations. For example, tight travel or time budgets, fragile or lost originals. For example, in the study of fragments and their relations, digital labs such as Fragmentarium or tools such as the IIIF shared canvas greatly enhance research experiences because they allow the virtual combination of dispersed originals. Second, in some cases, digital surrogates are in a way better research objects. Think of enlarging, which allows for better readability and recognition of details. Third, the use of digital research environments and tools such as databases and online reference books, for example Wuttke for watermarks or Manuscripta Medievalia, the Patrologia Latina, the Incunabler short title catalogue, or the Schönberg database of manuscripts allow for greater research efficiency, different research methodologies and questions, because they make it easier to find relations and connections across time and space, especially if you think of interdisciplinary, collaborative research projects, like for example in historical meteorology. Last but not least, there are research scenarios that are almost impossible or impossible without digital surrogates. Think of multispectral imaging to discover hidden details such as erased ink traces, the research of palimpsests, overpainted illustrations, or the research of books damaged by fire and of water. There are also downsides. First of all, not all aspects of the original can be represented digitally. Very obviously, smelling or touching sensations are lost. Other aspects, like the quality of the parchment or the paper of a manuscript, will never be rendered fully equivalent through digital means. But when it comes to aspects such as watermarks, rulings, size ratios, the structure of manuscripts, many of these aspects could be researched better digitally if there were more markers, if the picture quality was better, like better lighting, better resolution, if the pictures were taken from both sides, even if one side was empty, if the gutter was included in the picture, if more additional information, metadata, was included during the cataloging process, and if the cataloging descriptions were more standardized and available as linked open data. Let me sum up my initial observations. Though we have seen during the last decennia a huge growth of the digitization of sources and digital scholarship in medieval studies, with digital scholarship meaning digital scholarly production as well as communication, the current situation is not ideal to fully reap its fruits. Still, many primary and secondary sources are not digitized and or open access and is not available for research. And too much information is lost during digitization or difficult to work with. This means that research with digital surrogates and tools could be greatly enhanced by better access to metadata and better quantity and quality of these metadata, meaning metadata more adequate to medievalist research needs and practices. Therefore, we need to overcome the two main obstacles: the lack of access of digital information and the inability to digitally reuse and build on this information. To advance the situation is a task for medievalist and cultural heritage institutions alike, as I will detail in the second part of my talk. The conventional scholarly research and publication system in medieval studies can be characterized as closed, science-centric and based on a print paradigm. Its best known representatives are probably the paywall PDF of articles or books, a format that offers little opportunity for immediate digital enhanced reuse. Its opposite is an open, digitally enhanced scholarly production and communication system that reaches beyond academia. This demand is closely connected with a movement that is often referred to with the term open science or open scholarship, a movement that describes a paradigm change for scholarly production and communication based on a culture of openness. It encompasses several practices of an open ecosystem that aim at making research and research dissemination more accessible, transparent, and reusable, such as open access, open data, open source, or open educational resources. In the following, I will outline 3 central stepstones on the road to this envisaged open future of the scholarly production and communication system for medieval studies: more open access publishing, more public-oriented communication, and more digital enhanced production and communication. Let me come first to open access publishing. Access to information is a human right that is laid down in international human rights treaties as well as in national laws, for example, the German Institution. However, the immediate change from analog to digital has led to the paradoxical situation that former gateways to information, knowledge and culture, such as libraries, have become gatekeepers, sometimes unintentionally. With this I mean not only cases where laws or market mechanisms limit how cultural heritage institutions can distribute digital information. These cases I would call unintentional gatekeeping, but cases where libraries and other cultural heritage institutions ask for a significant amount of money for publishing rights for digitized manuscripts which are so old that no author copyright can be claimed for them anymore, which is certainly almost the case for medieval manuscripts. I can only briefly touch upon this issue here, but in a blog post I have written more about the problem that the licensing models of libraries and other institutions and legal restrictions imposed on archival sources make it almost impossible for medievalists to publish digitized manuscripts or even contributing to community source collections if the default for pictures is set to open access. Even though there are definitely GLAM institutions pioneering open access to their digital resources, for example the Smithsonian, and infrastructure initiatives like Europeana or the Data Reuse Charter working towards achieving this goal, there are still need for a more progressive, reuse-oriented licensing models handled by GLAM institutions. Open access is also a responsibility of scholars. At the moment, scholars still sign away to easily copyright for their research products to commercial publishers. Close publishing models in exchange for the reputation of the publishing venue. Researchers from the global north that are in the lucky situation that fees for closed access publications are covered by their institutional libraries, although soaring prices constitute increasingly problems for those libraries, need to be better aware of the implications of their publishing choices. Closed access means, simply speaking, that publicly funded research becomes a commercial good, with access being lost or at least difficult for actors with less financial power, like researchers from the Global South or the general public. To democratize access, scholars need more information, more support, and clear incentives for choosing open publication models, as well as attractive alternative open publication venues. The second aspect of opening the scholarly publication process is a diversification of scholarly publication formats. Already the 2012 San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, short DORA, underlined the necessity to consider a diversity of outputs from scientific research, opposed to the current dominant journal impact factor. Alternative outputs, especially mentioned in this declaration, are datasets and software. These research assets contribute greatly to improving overall transparency and reusability, especially the potential to digitally reuse and build on information. DORA and other recommendations for evaluation recommend also to consider qualitative impact measures and to look deeper into aspects of social impact, promoting a greater diversity of formats, analog or digital. If medievalists start thinking beyond the conventional academic paper or monograph, they can choose from a diverse spectrum of communication formats and tools in order to broaden the impact of their research findings, especially when it comes to the communication of research outputs to diverse and multiple target groups outside the small circle of fellow experts, such as policymakers, the general public, or teachers and students. Digital formats and channels such as blogs, podcasts, audiovisual and multimedia resources or social media provide many opportunities. These low threshold formats are not only a means to reach a broader audience with research results, they can also be used for a faster communication of research processes and intermediate stages, thus creating more transparency also within the research community. The third aspect I would like to discuss is digital enhanced production and communication beyond the scholarly article or book. In this context, the differentiation between legal and technical openness is crucial. If we take the 5-star open data model by Tim Berners-Lee, we can see that the PDF format, even with an open license, only satisfies the requirements for 1 star, because it is technically very closed. Greater technical openness, indicated in this model by more stars, means that closed data silos become linked open data, a main constituent of the envisaged open ecosystem that is based on a more data-centric, scholarly publication and communication process. While probably many medievalists would not use the word data in connection to their research workflow, but talk about their sources, research materials, or more specifically manuscript, text, pictures, etc., these resources and research materials are, generally speaking, data. Talking about data is not new in the humanities. Already in the 2003 Berlin Declaration on Open Access to Knowledge in the Science and Humanities mentions that beside articles and books, research data should be made available in open access. As already mentioned, enabling open access to research data is not solely a task for researchers. On the one hand, often cultural heritage institutions dictate the terms for use for digital reproductions of their holding. On the other hand, they are important infrastructure partners. It becomes clear that simply saying we need more open access is not enough to enhance digital research practices in medieval studies, because the potential of metadata for digital research practices is defined by legal and technical aspects. This leads me to the FAIR data principles that were developed to refine and stronger underline aspects of machine readability and interoperability as basic requirements for data reuse. The acronym FAIR stands for Findable, Accessible, Interoperable and Reusable. FAIR datasets are accessible for research, as open as possible and as closed as necessary. They are well documented using standards and available in interoperable standardized formats. Standards play a great role in the FAIRification process, because the more standardized data are being produced, described, processed and published, the more interoperable and reusable they are for automatic processing by computational applications. Widely accepted, discipline-specific standards relevant for medieval studies are, for example, the guidelines of the Text Encoding Initiative, the Charter Encoding Initiative, the Music Encoding Initiative, the International Interoperability Framework, or the Encoded Archival Description. One of the biggest and so far many unsolved challenges of reusability is data quality. One point of critique concerning the FAIR data principles is that they are describing data quality rather from a service perspective or infrastructure perspective, but are not well suited to describe scientific data quality. To achieve high scientific data quality, the explication of tacit knowledge in a machine-readable standardized format is needed. But what is this tacit knowledge? If we consider the digital surrogate of a manuscript as the original stripped down to the essentials, as I have discussed at the beginning, then medievalists need to define what in their opinion are essential aspects that need to be represented in the digital surrogate of a manuscript. The goal would be to find a common denominator or standard for aspects to be covered and the way they should be covered. Looking into my crystal ball, I see, for example, high-resolution pictures, information about watermarks, pictures of complete pages, including the gutter, and also the empty backs of pages, more standardized cataloging data available as linked open data, and more connection between research results and digital resources, for example, cataloging, feeding each other back and forth through crowdsourced correction or collective contribution models. Of course, I am not the first who thinks about discipline-specific quality discourses that inform internal research practices as well as digitization processes and GLAM institutions. Some guidelines and recommendations for research-oriented digitization do already exist. But I do think that this aspect needs to be discussed with renewed intensity, because existing guidelines and recommendations are often rather general and not as widely implemented as one would wish for. The better digitization processes and digital workflows are informed by discipline-specific data quality requirements, the higher is the reuse potential of these data. I'm coming to the end of my presentation. The principles of open science or open scholarship, with their strong focus on transparency along the research cycle, imply changes for all kinds of digital scholarly production and communication processes, which affect the very nature of scholarly objects. These changes are illustrated on the figure on the slide. During my presentation, I have touched upon some of these changes. Not so long ago, the primary research output was the publication, but since then, we have seen a greater diversity in research data outputs, including large reference datasets relied on by disciplines, the addition of models, workflows, code as an additional category of output, and the growing number of ways to represent n-dimensional datasets through techniques such as video, simulations, virtual reality, and augmented reality. Only recently have we reached also in the humanities a point where data are being considered as a first-class research output. We need to stipulate this paradigm change further, not because it will render access to physical materials, to originals, superfluous, but because of the advantages of an open, digital, enhanced scholarly production and communication system that reaches beyond medieval studies and even beyond academia. Such an open system has tremendous potential to stimulate research because it provides researchers and the general public with better access to an abundance of research materials that cater diverse, especially interdisciplinary research methods and interests, leading to new research questions. I'm curious to see how far experiences from the extreme lockdown situation will contribute to the amplification of digital research practices and medieval studies, and the reflection on their potential and needs. Will everything go back to normal, or will this happen against a different background? My hope is that medieval studies will have changed here and there to a lighter and more open space, and that we can take this discussion further. Thank you for your attention.